My name is Ethan Calder, 35 years old. I am a mid-level officer in the International Alliance Task Force, having commanded top-secret missions in the Middle East. Over the years, I've set foot in places that maps are still debating whether to mark. I've survived unannounced attacks, lying motionless all night under cold sand, just waiting for a helicopter to silently glide by. I've pulled comrades back from the brink of death, sometimes with just one hand. I'm not the type to boast, and I've never needed anyone's pity. But there's one thing I've never said out loud, something that made me quietly strive little by little, and that's the name I carry, Calder. Calder isn't just a surname. It's an invisible badge etched by the man the entire military world knew, General Robert Calder, my father. He wasn't easy to get along with, and certainly not a typical father. I don't remember him ever hugging me after my mother died. What I received were orders, harsh training, and disappointment wrapped in coldness. To him, a scratch was weakness, a moment of hesitation was failure, and an imperfect soldier was an untrustworthy soldier. I once thought if I was good enough, I'd make him proud. I joined the military not because he forced me, but because I wanted to step out of his shadow. But when you're born in too large a shadow, the light ahead, sometimes it's just an illusion. At 27, I was deployed to Afghanistan for an 8-month mission. It was the first time I commanded an independent unit, and we succeeded. No casualties. For anyone else, it would have been a miracle. But in the first and only and brief letter my father sent, he only wrote, "No one dying is good, but true success is not having to write a report." I gave a bitter laugh when I read that line. Perhaps it was the first time I understood to him I was always not enough. I continued to push forward. The Middle Eastern battlefield was constantly changing, and so was I. I learned to read an enemy's expression through a thermal screen, how to give an order in 3 seconds, or lose the whole team. Gradually, I became someone I no longer recognized, cold, precise, never hesitating. Then came Operation Ember Field, the mission that changed everything. The place where the reputation I built over 7 years, the fragile hopes for my father's recognition, all collapsed in a single night. I didn't know that the moment I jumped from the helicopter that night, another clock also started counting down, not survival time, but the time until I became the next target. And when I walked into the courtroom that day with dozens of high-ranking officers looking at me as if I were the most dangerous virus in the system, I understood. It's not the enemy out there who kills you. It's the people who once called you comrade in a clean report. But what I was never prepared for was when I saw my father stand up as a witness, turn towards me, and point. The Alliance military court is unlike any trial you've seen in movies. No jury, no fiery opposing lawyers. Just cold stares, gleaming wooden benches, and nameplates etched in brass generals, admirals, colonels, people who didn't need to speak loudly to silence the room. I stood there in my dress uniform, belt, cinched, tight collar, neat shoulders, still aching dully from an unhealed wound. They called my name, the emotionless announcer's voice echoing like a dry hammer blow into my memory. On the witness stand, the first person to stand was my father. I had thought he would avoid me or at least remain silent, but no. He stood there back, straight eyes sharp as a bayonet, and spoke. Officer Ethan Calder let emotion override reason. He acted against orders, and the price was 3 lives. I regret to say this, but if he weren't my son, I would have requested his immediate dismissal from the start. No one in the room uttered a word. Neither did I. My chest felt like someone was pounding it with a hammer, every word he spoke, splitting my sternum. I looked him straight in the eyes, cold, clean, not a trace of emotion, as if he were rereading a technical report he hadn't written with ink, but with a knife. But I didn't resist, didn't scream, didn't cry. I just stood up, unbuttoned my jacket, took off my officer's epaulets, then quietly pulled up my white shirt. The room held its breath. Under the dim yellow light, the scars on my body appeared as clear as a battle map. A long tear on my side from a grenade fragment, a crumpled indentation on my ribs from being buried under dirt while shielding others. 2 small pieces of metal still under my skin. The doctor said surgery would hit nerves, possibly causing paralysis. I said nothing. I just stood there letting them look. And they did look. Admiral Foster frowned, leaning forward slightly. A Canadian general nodded subtly, his gaze changing. The expressions of the officers on the council, from skepticism to silence then to understanding. When I pulled my shirt down and adjusted my collar, I said only one sentence. I don't need you to call me a hero, but don't call me a traitor, not when I was the last one to leave that battlefield. I returned to my seat, my head still held high. My father looked at me, and for the first time in his life, he had nothing to say. After that hearing, I was called up to the 3rd floor command room, an area reserved for high-ranking officers. A long hallway paved with gray limestone so quiet that my footsteps echoed clearly like warning drums. The person waiting for me was Admiral Nathaniel Foster, commander of the Alliance fleet, one of the few people I still trusted. He stood by a large window overlooking the military plaza. When he heard the door close, he didn't turn around immediately. He just asked, "I want to hear your version, Ethan. Everything. Don't hide anything." I stood straight without papers in my hand, no evidence. Only memories heavier than any classified file I had ever read. I told him about Operation Ember Field. The name sounded beautiful, but its essence was a dark mission no one wanted to talk about again. We Raven 6 were ordered to raid a signal station on the Syria-Iraq border. Intelligence said it was just a small insurgent group guarding it, no artillery, no drones, nothing unusual. The mission would last no more than 45 minutes, then a helicopter would extract us. But 5 minutes after touching down, everything collapsed. No reinforcements, no communication. All satellite signals were jammed. The whole team was attacked from 3 sides by heavily armed forces, and worst of all, unidentified drones circled overhead recording our every move. I clearly remember Alvarez's scream when he was shot in the shoulder, Ruiz's rapid breathing as he bandaged Diaz's bleeding, and the chilling feeling when I realized we had been ambushed. I looked at Foster. Do you know what made me suspicious first the time? The official report stated that we were deployed at 21:00. But I remembered my wristwatch clearly showed 20:35 when I jumped from the helicopter. At least 25 minutes were erased from all official records, and that couldn't be a mistake. Foster was silent for a long time. He turned, looked at me, and for the first time his gaze was no longer interrogative, but filled with genuine concern. Do you have any proof? I pulled a small, black, unmarked, unnumbered USB from my breast pocket. This is a copy of data from my personal locator internal audio recordings and strange satellite signals that I extracted before the system was wiped clean. Foster plugged the device into the machine. A series of files appeared. Data streams began to flow. When he opened the first audio file, it was my voice shouting into the internal radio, requesting reinforcement coordinates 22.7. No response, repeat, no response. The Admiral fell silent. His hand instinctively gripped the computer mouse. Then I said the last thing, something I hadn't told anyone, not even my team. After returning, I received an anonymous email. It just said, "Don't try to forget. Find Helion Technologies." Foster looked up, his eyes changing. "Helion, you mean the tactical drone contractor?" I nodded. "And also the sponsor of the Battlefield AI Control Research, the program my father approved 3 years ago." The name Helion Technologies pierced through my memory like a bullet. A private defense company that had emerged in the past decade as a tech ghost, specializing in developing combat AI, autonomous drones, and automated tactical systems. No one outside high command knew how far they had tested. and I had never thought my team was an experiment. But after that email, I started digging deeper. Initially, I thought I just needed to confirm a few leaked pieces of information. But the more I uncovered, the more I realized I was stepping into a maze full of barbed wire where every step forward was a new cut into my trust. Foster had his technical team examine the USB I provided. 3 days later, he called me back to his private office along with a Dutch cybersecurity expert named Lieutenant Colonel Maaike Verhoeven. She presented the investigation results. We found traces of a stealth sync program, a type of software that allows data to be overwritten directly from military satellites without leaving a log in the main system. I frowned. So someone erased data from outside the system? She nodded. And only those with Overwatch Tier 1 access could do it. I turned to Foster. That was an extremely restricted rank reserved for generals, strategic advisors, and direct research partners involved in experimental projects. The list was only 13 people. On that list was my father. That evening, I received a second email. No sender name, no traceable IP, just an audio recording with the caption, "If you want the truth, be ready to be swallowed by it." I listened to the recording with my private headphones. A man's voice slightly trembling. Helion is using the Raven 6 unit as a variable to test human reaction behavior when cornered by tactical drones. It wasn't a mission, it was a real-time simulation test. The AI evaluated human reactions from psychology to decision-making speed, and if they died, even more data. I stiffened, my hand clenched as if to crush the USB in my pocket. I decided to investigate from the source, my father. I went straight to his office. He had been transferred to the Contingency Command Center in Berlin by then. He was startled when he saw me, but quickly hid it. "Ethan, what are you doing here? I need to ask you something," I said, "about Helion and about Tier 1 access." He was silent for a moment, then put his pen down. "I signed the AI research funding contract 3 years ago, but they promised to only test simulations, never in real combat situations. Did you verify that?" I asked. "They are high-level partners. They were approved by command." He replied slightly evasively. "And you didn't know they put a real unit, my team, into a hidden test?" I emphasized each word, my voice quiet but sharp as a knife. He didn't answer. Only his eyes trembled slightly, something I had never seen in 30 years, as his son panicked. Foster sent a special investigation team to Helion's subsidiary headquarters in Prague. In just 72 hours, they seized encrypted servers containing thousands of AI testing data logs. Among them was a folder named Control Variables / Raven 6. Inside were drone videos recording my team's every move, tactical reaction maps, voice emotion analysis, and a statistical table. Desired fatalities 2, 3. Unexpected reaction 1 commanding officer launched direct counterattack risk of AI failure. Note Officer Calder did not react as predicted by the model. Result not as expected. I read that and my whole body trembled, not from fear, but from rage. We were pawns in a game where the players never dared to show their faces. The evidence was there. The truth was slowly emerging. But I had forgotten one important thing: those in power always have a better media team than any gun. The first news broke on a semi-independent military news site, Officer Ethan Calder, Hero or Post-Traumatic Delusion. The article was over 2,000 words long, quoting internal sources, saying I was showing severe signs of PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder. They published a photo of me sitting alone in front of the interrogation room, my face tired, my eyes distant, then fabricated a story about an obsessed commander who made up a conspiracy to avoid responsibility after a failed mission. They called my scars the remnants of tactical errors. They didn't know or deliberately forgot that I carried each of those soldiers back on my shoulders and that those very errors were what kept the entire team alive. 2 days later, my father appeared on a mainstream television news channel. The journalist asked him, "What do you think about Ethan Calder's allegations that his team was an experiment by a defense corporation?" He replied, without blinking, "I am deeply saddened to see my son so disturbed that he imagines a non-existent conspiracy." Ethan was once a good soldier, but after Ember Field, he changed. He started to doubt everything, even himself. I sat in my small rented room in Berlin, the dim light shining on the screen. His face appeared cold as ice, talking about me as if I were dead, or worse, as if I had never existed. He killed me once again, but this time with words. The next day I received the decision temporary suspension for investigation of violating security protocols, despite the evidence I had, despite the anonymous witness testimony, despite the encrypted server data being verified. "This is not punishment," they said, "just standard procedure." Standard for whom? For the exposer or for the manipulator? At that moment, I realized truth was never the goal. Controlling the narrative was everything. In an old bar near Potsdamer Platz station, I met the anonymous email sender. He arrived on time wearing a leather jacket hood, pulled down, his voice soft but sharp as metal. "My name is Nolan, former AI tactical development engineer for Helion." I remained silent. "I quit after Ember Field. I designed the behavior assessment model for your team. They said it was a simulation, but I knew the entire test was a real-world simulation within a real-world context. And do you know the worst part?" He pulled out a USB. "The AI data confirmed you shouldn't have survived. If you died, the model would have been approved for its high efficiency. But you lived and reacted beyond prediction, so they had to erase you from the equation." I took the USB, looking at the video logs. In them were drone recordings of me carrying Ruiz through a hail of bullets, me planting explosives to clear a path for retreat, me kneeling beside a dying Alvarez. All of it not from my team's cameras, but from Helion's system. We weren't just targets, we were a test, and I decided if the system erased my name from the records, I would engrave it onto the council table with my own hands, with words, with evidence, and with the scars that had never healed. I had lost my honor. I had lost my position. I had lost my father not because he died, but because he chose to stand with those who created the pain rather than with the survivor. But I still had the truth. And the truth, when spoken at the right time, can shatter a seemingly unshakable power structure. I sat in a temporary rented room on the outskirts of the city. On the table were Nolan's USB, a copy of the hard drive from Foster's investigation team, video files, audio logs, maps, and dozens of internal reports extracted from the Helion system. Every line of text, every image told one thing. We did not fail. We were betrayed. I placed everything into a hard box sealed with a dynamic QR code linked to a remote monitoring system. If anyone touched it, the data would automatically be disseminated to 3 independent media outlets I had prepared. There was no turning back. Foster, despite political pressure from above, used his personal prerogative to request a special hearing with the Alliance Military Council, consisting of high-ranking commanders from NATO, ASEAN, the African Union, and the Pacific Forces. I was called as the final witness. When I entered the room, the air was so thick it felt like it could be cut with a knife. The generals and admirals sat straight, no one smiling. All wore real-time language translation headphones. I knew every word I was about to say would echo simultaneously in 6 different languages. And in the last row, silently, was my father. No longer in uniform, no longer with a nameplate. Just an old man sitting alone, his eyes as somber as a long frozen lake. I began not with evidence. I began with memory. I remember lying under a broken tree next to Ruiz, blood from his shoulder running onto my hand. I couldn't keep him awake, so I started telling him about the coldest burrito of my life at Kandahar base. And he laughed. All the while, the drone was recording us slowly dying. The entire room was silent. I presented the data step by step, unusual signal interference 4 minutes before the attack. GPS data time shifted by 27 minutes. Helion's drone recording from an altitude only achievable by an experimental flight axis. The AI algorithm evaluating every movement as a machine learning lesson. If the commander hesitated, the drone would note it as an unoptimized variable. Then I played the audio recording of Nolan's confession. His voice echoed in the room. We designed the AI to evaluate tactical effectiveness in real-life conditions, and to test it precisely, they used real people. Raven 6 was just one test line. At least 3 other units were put into simulated within real scenarios. Many people in the room sat upright. Some took off their headphones looking at each other. I glanced at my father. For the first time, he bowed his head. Finally, I displayed the last video footage from Helion's drone, a close-up of me shielding Ruiz with my body setting explosives to clear a retreat path and shouting over the radio, "I don't need anyone to save me, but they have to live." The courtroom was utterly silent. I looked around, my voice deepening. If this is how the world treats survivors, then erase the word glory from all military banners. I am not standing here to be believed. I am standing here to reclaim the voice of those who were called variables. My father stood up. His hands trembled slightly. I signed the authorization document for Helion's testing. I believed it was only a simulation, but I was wrong. I had no idea they used real missions. If I had known, I swear I would never have let it happen. He turned to me. Ethan, I am no longer worthy to call you my son, but if you allow it, I will testify with you, not to atone, but to ensure this never happens again. The entire room stood up, not for him, but because the truth had transcended the entire system. 3 weeks after that historic hearing, the Alliance Military Council held an emergency closed-door meeting in Brussels. Before that, Foster sent me a brief email. They voted 12-1 against. It passed. The name of the new clause, Calder Clause. This clause strictly prohibits all forms of combat technology testing not approved for safety, especially the use of soldiers in field conditions, without written consent. Violations will be prosecuted internationally as war crimes. The name of the clause left me silent for a long time, not out of honor, but ironically, it bore the surname of the person who had once denied me. But now it represented another generation of soldiers, those who died nameless and those like me who survived to speak out. Helion Technologies was investigated on a global scale. Assets were frozen, headquarters were searched, engineers and executives were arrested. An internal email was leaked with the subject line, Calder is an unexpected variable. His existence threatens the business model. Defense leaders in 3 countries, the US, Germany. France simultaneously resigned after being found to have received illegal funding from Helion. Hundreds of millions of USD in contracts were canceled overnight. An entire arms empire thought to be impregnable collapsed because of a buried report and a soldier who refused to be silenced. I received a handwritten letter, unsealed, not sent by mail. My father brought it himself, leaving it at my door when I was out. Ethan, I don't expect your forgiveness. Some mistakes cannot be undone, only lived with for the rest of one's life. But you taught me something that my entire career never understood. Scars are not blemishes. Scars are proof that you stood up when all others had fallen. If I could exchange every medal I ever received for a fraction of your courage, I would. I didn't reply, not out of anger, but because I didn't want to end with forgiveness or a hug. We had lived too long in silence, and now silence was also a way to accept each other. A month later, I received an invitation to be a guest lecturer at the International Security and War Ethics Academy, a newly established training center in Belgium. In my first lecture, I wore my old uniform, no medals, no rank. I just raised my hand, pulled up my right sleeve, revealing the long, winding scar on my bicep. This, I said, is not a medal, nor is it proof of courage. It is a warning. That if you agree to fight without knowing who is sitting behind the controls, then you are not warriors. You are targets. You are variables. And variables can be erased at any time. Finally, I returned to the old base, where the Raven 6 memorial stood. On the cold black stone, the names of Alvarez Ruiz Diaz mothers were deeply etched along with their date of sacrifice. At the bottom of the monument, a new small line was etched. They did not die, they survived and spoke the truth. I once thought I had to carry these scars for the rest of my life as proof of failure. That I wasn't good enough to save everyone, not strong enough to be trusted, and not important enough to survive for a just cause. But now I understood one simple thing: I was still here, and I had spoken the truth. That was something no one could take from me. No system, no government, no father. In the late afternoon, I stood by the small beach near the old base waves, gently lapping at my shoes, my hand gripping the old Raven 6 team badge. In the sky, a civilian drone hovered, but this time I didn't feel watched. I just felt free. Behind me, no longer a battlefield. Before me, no need for a new war, just a life, where truth is not buried, where memories are not distorted, and where the name Ethan Calder is no longer a variable. But a reminder that sometimes survivors are not the strongest, but those who dare to stand up last.